They said after the Watergate scandal that it wasn't the crime, it was the cover-up. And I can't help but think about that when listening to your testimony here today, because what happened to Valerie Plame and to Joe Wilson was unconscionable, but that was the cover-up. The real crime was the way the war was packaged and sold to a frightened nation after 9/11 and under false pretenses, and that's what I want to discuss and focus on with you here today. You make a reference in your book to President Bush's philosophy of coercive democracy, and you've talked about that here today, and I'll quote you, "A belief that Iraq was ripe for conversion from a dictatorship into a beacon of liberty through the use of force, and a conviction that this could be achieved at nominal cost." Do you, in that vein, do you think that there was a conclusion in the administration on going to war with Iraq at the outset, and a subsequent effort to fit the facts and emphasize points that would convince the American people, members of Congress, and the press that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and was an imminent threat?
I'm sorry, do I think that...
Do you think basically that the administration, from the president through
Right.
the vice president and the upper tier leadership
Right.
of the White House, fit the facts based on this coercive democracy philosophy to what they ultimately wanted to be the end, which was for Congress to support the war and the public to support the war?
Well, the facts were certainly packaged in a way to make the most compelling case to the American people, with the caveats and qualifications and contradictions pretty much left out of that.
You do emphasize in your book that you don't think there was deliberate out-and-out deception.
Right.
But...
And that's not speaking to every individual, but as a whole, that I don't think Colin Powell and others were sitting in a meeting, let's go out and deliberately mislead the American people.
So who is it that, where do you make the distinction? Who do you think was engaged in out-and-out deception, and who do you think maybe was more involved in distortion?
I can't speak to that because of my role at the time in the build-up to the war about what, and I can't get in the head of every individual and what they were thinking and what they might have been promoting within the administration.
Do you believe do you believe the president was more focused on distortion as opposed to deception? I mean, he was more willing to distort and emphasize facts? Well,
it was this whole idea that you can run a war-making campaign like a political campaign and use the same kind of spin and manipulation that you do in a political campaign or in a campaign to push forward on education reforms or Social Security reform. And I think that that's the mistake, a big mistake that was made in this administration.
I want to bring out something you just said, you just implied a minute ago. A minute ago you implied that there were some that did not intentionally deceive the American people, but that left the impression that perhaps you think there are some that did intentionally deceive the American people.
I can't rule that out, whether or not some were or were not. We don't have a lot of answers to some of those questions today.
So who can you indicate that you believe engaged in deception?
Well, again, I don't have direct knowledge in terms of the build-up to the war of who might have been trying.
But it's an opinion that you hold. You must have an idea within the opinion.
Again, I don't have direct knowledge of that. What I say in the book is that we were less than open and we were less than candid, but it wasn't in my view, some sinister attempt where everybody was sitting around, let's go out and mislead the American people. Whether or not an individual held certain views and was engaging in that, I can't speak to.
Do you think the process evolved, even though they might not publicly or stated in meetings that they intended to mislead the American people? Do you basically think that that's what it evolved into?
Well, it certainly had a result of being misleading. I think that's what I make clear.
Do you think that President Bush, Andy Card, and Vice President Cheney or others knew that there was no imminent threat from Iraq to the U.S. when it came to weapons of mass destruction, and that they distorted the facts in order to convince Congress to support the war?
Do I think that any of those individuals did? The president, the chief
president,
staff?
the vice president, and
again, I can't speak to every individual. I don't think from my experience that the president was viewing it that way, or that Andy Card was, and but I'm not going to try to speak to every individual.
Do you think any of those three individuals knew that there was no imminent threat from Saddam Hussein with weapons of mass destruction?
Well, and the way we portrayed it was that it may not be imminent, but it was a grave and gathering threat, and whether or not some of those individuals knew that it wasn't that serious or that urgent of a threat that needed addressing, I don't know.
But you emphasize in the book, and I want to clarify that now, that was not necessarily the primary reason for going to war, coercive democracy was, but that they thought that was the argument that would be the most convincing to the American people.
Right, and I think that's been made in statements made in the public.
Okay, and as my time expires, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to ask one other question. Do you think Karl Rove lied to the President of the United States about his involvement in the plane scandal?
Based on what the President told me, I believe that, because the President told me that Carl had told him he was not involved in the revealing of her identity.
Do you think Vice President Cheney lied at any point in this process?
I don't know, because I've not had conversations with him about it.
And do you think there are any instances in which Karl Rove lied to the President on other policy matters?
I don't know specifically. We'd have to try to address each specific issue, but I don't know specifically off the top of my head anything I can think of.
Just let me ask, if you don't mind, and one more thing, and if you can indulge me. Whom in the White House are the relevant people, if anyone, that you believe should be brought before this committee or any other congressional committees to get more specific answers to these questions that might have more specific knowledge?
Well, certainly on the plane episode, I mean, the Vice President has information that has not been shared publicly. And you could go on down the list from Scooter Libby to Karl Rove, Ari Fleischer. There are others that have probably not shared, that have not shared everything that they know about this.
So you think each of those people should be brought in front of a
Well, I think that it would be a
congressional
benefit if they shared, if everything was known and if they shared what they knew.